We're now live with the May 8th, 2019 meeting of the modules team. I'm going to go ahead and immediately hand this off. I'm going to go ahead and make Jeffrey the host for right now, and maybe just everyone else co-hosts. I'm about to drop. Thank you, everyone, for joining today, and just ping me if there's any emergencies. Have a good meeting.
Thanks, all right. I don't know what it means to be host, so I assume someone will help me, or I can pass it off to somebody else if I need to.
Well, I think you'll do fine, as long as there are no emergencies.
It's just people to attendees or to panelists or whatever if they join, and then like.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll figure it out, I'm sure. So yeah, I think you passed it off to me because I think I have the first item on the agenda. So which was, well, maybe I don't need to share my screen, but basically, yeah, so apologies if you read this and were a little confused by it, because I kind of shared my thought process of how I got to the end result, which was perhaps a bit confusing because it was, my thought process involved dual packages, but the end result did not really relate to dual packages. So my apologies if that led people astray. But basically, I was thinking, we still want to solve named exports. At least I assume we still want to solve it because we kind of keep punting it. I think it's still on our list for phase 3. So named exports from CommonJS packages into an ESM. So you do import. So in other words, you want to be able to do import, brace, shuffle, brace from Lodash, and not just import underscore symbol from Lodash. Or from underscore, I guess would be a better example to be explicitly CommonJS package. Yes, so it seems like we've definitively turned against the out of order approach that Guy wanted, or Guy proposed, I should say. There was the dynamic modules approach, but I'm personally losing hope that that's ever going to get through. I just haven't heard any progress being made on that. So what I was going to suggest was, if that gets through, then great. Like, obviously that's a better solution than what I'm proposing here, which is just have package authors define their named exports somewhere in package.json with the format of such a field, like to be determined. And if dynamic modules comes through, and we've already implemented the package.json approach, then yeah, we should get rid of the package.json approach in favor of the dynamic approach, because dynamic approach is obviously better. So this, well, okay, I'm just responding to people in the chat. Like, if it happens, great. My feeling is like, if it doesn't happen, I think this is better than doing nothing. And so that's why I kind of wanted to propose, let's see if we can figure out a solution that, like, the last ditch option for if we can't make dynamic models or some other dynamic version of named exports work, then it's just in package.json, and then we've got at least this. And then if a dynamic version ends up happening, we can replace it with that. So Jordan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so there were two things I wanted to say. The first is that the path forward on dynamic modules, I think, is removing stuff from the JavaScript spec and delegating more to the hosts, which browsers are always on board with, or at least in this case, browsers seem to always be on board with, and would permit us to do dynamic modules. The fact that there was discomfort in the TC39 meeting doesn't mean that that we don't have a path forward there. The second thing is, if we have dual modules, or if we have the ability to import CJS, then it seems like we that would be a better approach to me than a package JSON field to allow for this. Because if underscore wanted to make this happen, they would just, like, if they had, so if the package author needs to make a change in order to allow named imports of their thing, of their CJS thing, such as adding stuff to their package JSON, then they could also add for whatever their entry point .js is, they could add an entry point .mjs that pulls in the common JS one and explicitly re-exports the named exports. So I think that to me, if we have a dual module solution or a dual mode package solution, that we've kind of already answered a lot of open questions in that it becomes very trivial for people to make their package consumable in both module systems. And I think that's the path I would rather go down, rather than trying to add package JSON configuration for each small little use case that comes up that's important. I would rather solve it more holistically and come up with a consensus for a dual module solution that then can naturally kind of obviate most of the other concerns. I think that's my bit.
Okay, Sala?
Yeah, I was unmuted, actually. I didn't know that. I think the question of generating named exports in a package JSON can also be framed as differently by saying the amount of diligence you need to put that information in JSON format just as well can be done to wrap your CJS module with an ECMAScript module export. Create require from path, or create require now, and then you require your module and you export what you need. Both of them come with the potential circular references problem that dynamic modules is trying to actually eliminate duplicate module records, so that circularity does not hit that async sync problem. So I think the solution theoretically solves the problem, but it does not necessarily technically solve the dilemma of how do you solve the circular references problem. So I just want to raise that, and maybe you thought about that, maybe you tried, and it's not really an issue there.
Well, isn't that a problem not related to named exports? Isn't that just like a general problem with importing CommonJS to ESM?
No, I think the circularity problem is why we don't have named exports, because there is no clean way to avoid circularity without dual records, like having a module have more than one record. And that actually creates the discontinuity, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think that has anything to do with circularity. The reason we don't have named exports is because CJS doesn't have that concept. And it's not appropriate to just always take all the object keys and treat them as named exports. Circularity is something that can be done in CJS if you follow certain patterns. And if you don't follow those patterns, then obviously you wouldn't be able to have circularity there. And that I don't think is changed by importing into ESM or not.
Can I phrase what you just said? So if you know your module keys, you don't need to execute the module before you expose it as an ESM named export. A solution to do that at this point in time is not cleanly available. So we found that, whatever, we end up in a position where we evaluate the module, then get that object that has its keys. So if you have a circular reference to one of those keys and a module record that would have had that value, then you can't really circle back to that particular reference without a solution like dynamic modules. Would that be a good way to frame this?
So I think that's accurate if you're talking about not explicitly typing out a list of what your named exports are. But I think that with a dual module approach or a package JSON field approach, both of those are explicitly typing out a list of named exports, meaning you happen to know in advance what your keys are, and so you've typed them in second place. that sidesteps that problem. But if we had addressed the problem you're talking about, then you wouldn't have to do that.
Yes. So the question would be, and I'm sorry, I'm going to direct that to Jordan because, sorry about the dogs. The question would be, would the package JSON declarative format give us an advantage over writing it in an ESM wrapper? Because an ESM wrapper naturally is a binding, but it's a, sorry, guys, no barking.
I mean, I'm assuming the package.json wrapper would function identically to the wrapper, wouldn't it?
It'd be the same. It's because if it's an ESM wrapper, you can statically lift out the names of the exports without a value. And if it's a package JSON, you'd be able to do the same. And then you'd construct a virtual ESM wrapper. So like,
yeah, but then you create this lack of ability to have circularity because you create this middle declarative object. Only this object is either a result of parsing the pJSON to create that proxy, or so you have to close the loop on that proxy.
I see what you're saying, but you don't actually disrupt the ability to have circularity. If the CJS module mutates its exports object, which is what is necessary in order to allow for circularity in CJS, then the ESM wrapper would be a live binding based on a property lookup from, like you could write the wrapper if you cared about the circularity, which most cases don't. You would write your wrapper the way that it used to get.
Can we not spend all our time on the circularity issue? Like if it's an issue, we can, if this even gets that far, we can address that as a concern. But is that fair? To Wes's point, the idea is that this Wes is talking in the chat about not just the main entry point, or not just the bare specifier, I'm assuming he's talking about. So my proposal was to cover at least that case, and I was assuming that, like, assuming we could move forward with the package paths, then that would be integrated with letting you define the named exports for paths. If we don't go forward with that, then I guess you could just define, rather than like dynamic friendly paths, you could define like literally the path to a particular file to be like, okay, for this file somewhere down in my package, here are the named exports for that. And it's just up to the author to define as many or as few named exports as they want to specify for whatever paths within their package. I deliberately didn't put like a example package.json in the proposal, because that's kind of like, you know, to be determined as we work out the finer details of all of this, if this is even something that people want to move forward on. So my feeling about it is just that obviously this is the least desirable solution. I guess really the question for the group is that, is it more desirable to do nothing than this, assuming that everything else fails in terms of dynamic and, you know, all the other dual package approaches that we're talking about? Like, say dual package doesn't advance beyond where it is now, and say, you know, dynamic modules doesn't advance beyond where it is now. Would we rather do this than nothing, or would we rather do nothing? That's, I think, the question.
Well, nothing doesn't preclude doing this later. Like we could even unflag with nothing and then add this as a semper.
Well, sure, but I'm proposing we like move forward on this in parallel to these other efforts, I guess. Guy?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention as well, when we think about making these sort of decisions, that as a group, we're not a group that's tied to one path. And I think a lot of the work that we've been doing and the way that we've been operating is in assuming that to some degree, we're exploring problem spaces and having separate proposals that are mutually exclusive is not a problem for us, so far as we're able to, at some point, make a decision. And so I think it could be a nice pattern to have if we don't have those other nice things. And there is nothing wrong with continuing to pursue that. And if anything, it's beneficial to pursue, or at least start to flesh out and discuss these kinds of proposals. I don't think shooting them down outright is beneficial, if that makes sense.
Okay. Wes, did you want to say something besides just be in the chat?
I don't know. I just wanted, like, we're talking about it. I just wanted to say why I don't think there's really a need for it. Like, why have out of band stuff when you can have in band stuff that already works, sort of? Like, I don't really see the greatest reason for it. Like, if you're like, someone might pull in my CJS part from ESM and then they might not get named exports. Well, if you're thinking that far ahead, you can just write an ESM entry point that overrides your CJS one that actually re-exports all of your stuff with names. Like, you don't need to put it in your package on, because you can already use
for everything except bare specifiers. That's true, but for, like, you know, the underscore case, for them to avoid having to do underscore slash, you know, ESM shuffle.mjs or whatever. That was what this was mostly about, was the bare specifier root case.
Yeah. Part of me has absolutely no desire to invest in making that any better, because I don't really believe that anything that doesn't have some sort of dual proposal is actually workable in the community. But that's just my opinion in that area.
What are you saying?
I'm saying bare specifiers, like having like bare specifiers should be handled uniformly across ESM and CJS. Like, having one way or another, dual mode handles bare specifiers and giving you named exports through them, either because CJS will get a CJS module that'll have named exports, or because CJS will get the ESM module that'll have named exports. And so I don't really see the point in, like, doing this at all. And if we don't have one of the dual mode proposals, I don't see the point in doing this, because I don't see, like, if we don't have dual mode, then including both CJS and ESM in your package isn't something you should be doing, because that's shipping two packages inside of your package, which isn't something you should be doing.
Yes.
So, you know, it's not something that I see as something that's really important.
I mean, that's, I guess, that goes into the next agenda item. Is I proposed this because in the last meeting there was disagreement about dual packages, like, even in principle, if it's something we should be supporting. I've been coming at this from the perspective that it seems pretty clear that users want them, and that it greatly helps the transition path, because otherwise, you know, a package like underscore either has to make a semver major change, breaking change, to flip everything to be, okay, now our main export is ESM, not common.js, and that's that. Or they have to just publish a separate package, underscore ESM or something like that. And I think both of those are pretty radical changes to force on package authors, that package authors would prefer to have a gentler, you know, migration path than that. And so that's what I thought the problem was we were trying to solve. But if people don't agree that that's something we should be providing for users, then that kind of puts all of these efforts kind of ground to a halt.
I think there is a number of us who do agree that it is a problem that we're trying to solve. Like, that's why there are multiple proposals about it.
Well, and the pushback I've heard has not been about the concept. It's been more about the risks of specific, like, implementation details. Like, there may be disagreement that solving this problem is worth certain trade-offs, but I haven't yet, that I'm aware of, heard anyone say we shouldn't solve this problem.
Well, here, I should stop talking. Salah's got his hand up.
So I just have one question. Maybe this goes to the idea Wes has been exploring, you know, flattening the async sync barrier at some point. Have we considered, no, sorry, I have not, but I'm sure others have considered adding a feature to the common.js module that a module can, like, let's say module.export from, and then you give it an ESM thing, and then somehow it would actually do the awaiting. You know, it interrupts the flow of things until the promises that need to be resolved are resolved. has this approach of making the common JS module be able to actually await seamlessly been explored? Like I know Wes is looking into that in on a V8 level, but generally speaking, have other people explored this?
Yeah, at STD ESM essentially did this.
Yeah, so Dalton, yeah, like I know for a fact that his loader approach is all synchronous.
Yeah, that's why I can say it essentially did this.
Yeah, but he does a lot of like wiring of every entity kind of thing, right? So he's shimming the ESM and CJS to some extent.
Yeah, because he's doing everything within the CJS loader that exists today. Yes.
Okay. Any other experience in that realm?
Whatchamacallit? I think one of Guy Bedford's projects did something pretty similar. Which one was it?
System, I think.
Probably. I think System
Yeah.
had similar behavior for a very long time.
Yeah, okay, so I think Guy's hand is up, so I'm just gonna.
Guy?
Sorry, I wasn't going to mention something on this topic, so if you want to finish discussing this first, you can come back to me.
Okay, so actually, we just mentioned that you looked into that topic. So do you mind chiming in on that topic? If it doesn't distract much, right?
I'm not sure what exactly what Wes is referring to there. So, I mean, I've had a few projects that have done this kind of loading, but they all are asynchronous, nothing synchronous, or nothing that flattens async operations.
Yeah, then like right, and like my only point is when everything's asynchronous, right? All you're doing is expressing asynchronous dependencies between your coroutine, between your continuations. From the runtime, that's really no different from a synchronous set of dependencies that need to be resolved. And so we are the runtime, and we do have the power to see those as equivalent. That's really it.
Theoretically, if everything is async, everything is sync. Kind of, because everything literally is the same chronological whatever, like facade or so a question would be wrapping CJS modules in generator, like the regenerator approach for promises. Would that be something feasible? Has this been explored? I mean, if this is distracting from the agenda item, please somebody just say let's move on.
Can we wrap this up in a minute?
Yeah. Okay, I'm done. I'm done on my part. Enough distractions.
Miles mentioned this at the last meeting, and it's probably worth looking into, but he was saying that like we put a lot of work into making a relatively nice C++ resolver for ESM that is separate from the CJS like require resolver that's written in JavaScript. And the C++ resolver is like, it has some promises in it, and it does some asynchronous stuff. If we do have the tool to do the syncification of the stuff in the resolver pipeline that we know doesn't depend on external stuff, it might be worth upgrading the entire CJS pipeline to also be in C++ and also always use these same sort of async resolution stuff, async resolutions, because they can be syncified in the same way. And then we just have one unified resolver in C++ that always does async stuff, but when you call it from CJS, it all resolves synchronously.
I wonder how Jay Dalton feels about that, since it would effectively kill his project.
We just have to have hooks for like require.extensions and stuff that can still be called from JS. It'd be fine.
Right.
We so need to cover the bundler use case because CJS is a target for Browserify and Webpack, and we need to make sure that, like currently, everyone transpiles to CJS and ships that in the browser effectively.
Yeah, and Webpack does that well enough that it supports top level await in its transpiled output. I think it's fine.
All right, can we punt this to say like refactoring / consolidating the resolvers is an effort that people are welcome to pursue?
Great theory.
And so just to wrap up what the agenda so far, regarding the package.json thing, I think if it's okay with everyone, this will be something that we can pursue in parallel to the other efforts, and we can decide farther down the line, depending on where the various efforts stand, you know, if we want to merge it in. Certainly that's a decision we'll tackle later, but in general, we'll just like start pursuing it. And if anyone wants to contribute, to contact me. I know we don't have quorum, but does anyone object to that so far?
No one can stop you from writing code.
All right. And then the other thing I guess to try to establish is I think we do have agreement that we do want to improve the general user story of whether it's a dual package or the transition from CommonJS to ESM packages. Is that something we have agreement on? Okay. So I think all of the various things are still going to move forward then, and we should keep working on the various proposals. And Guy, did you want to take your next thing?
Sure. No, I was just gonna. I just felt that the discussion was fairly one-sided in that there wasn't kind of much agreement. But so I just wanted to say I think it's a useful feature if we don't have other dual mode mechanisms, and the fact that it's additive and a graceful upgrade path, and it's the sort of thing that can easily be PR'd to any existing project, and it's the sort of thing that the maintainer really can't refuse because there's no cost to them, while maintaining instance equality, binding equality. I think it offers a nice dual mode story in the case where we don't have any other dual mode story, especially even more so.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, I realize like this is the crappiest solution there is, but it might be the only solution that we get by if we even get this one through. So that was, you know, that was the spirit in which I offered it. So, so I guess moving on to the next topic was the older of the two dual package approaches, which was basically defining a new field to specify the ESM entry point for the bare specifier. So that way a bare specifier like underscore could point to index.js, index.mjs. And rather than those both being defined through main, they would be defined through two separate fields. I had proposed in this thread that this doesn't have to be in conflict with the require of ESM that Wes is proposing, that we could just introduce the concept of a field that points to the ESM entry point, and then require of ESM can happen and just use it, you know, like it doesn't have to be overloading main to do so. And that way we can kind of unblock both of these proposals. And then if and when extension searching happens, we can decide to get rid of this second field and overload main if people want to do that. But I think like there are various people who would want to keep two fields regardless of whether extension searching happens. So I guess the question for the group is, can we move forward in that general direction on this to start like making progress on this, or do people have objections to that?
So
Jordan?
I had my hand up and I agreed with Wes's comment just now in the chat. So I think that first of all, it's weird that the same specifier could resolve to two different things depending on how you get to it. Generally, the resolution system is like, with the file system being constant, the resolution system is idempotent. In other words, one specifier is always and only resolves to one final thing. And that's a relatively important property for like resolver tools, bundlers for static analysis things. It's important to be able to like kind of like, I think Jest uses this property as well in its own require cache implementation. So like, I think that if we have a way to like, we do need a way. One of the ways we can provide dual packages is that we'll have to have dual entry points, unless we have some kind of transparent interop. So if we have multiple entry points, then we need a way to differentiate them. Two fields is one way, but if we have extension searching, we don't need the two fields. So I feel like it would be like, I'm not clear on the use cases for having two fields, if we have alternative ways to do it. And this is because
the
like
thing is we don't currently have alternative ways to do it. Like,
yeah, I mean,
like if extension searching happens, then we could reevaluate. My point is, if extension searching happens, sure, let's reevaluate, but it's not happening in the next few weeks. So rather than just having all progress be halted and blocked, waiting on that to someday maybe change, I'm saying like, let's just move forward and solve the case we're trying to solve of dual packages. And if it gets more ergonomic because extension searching comes later on, then we can,
right,
reconsider the packagization fields. That's easy to change.
I mean, the other thing is that the module field or whatever doesn't solve deep imports, dual deep imports, and that I think is just as important as the main. So like a package JSON field approach that could perhaps solve that with something where you say like, for ESM, use this folder as the package root instead of the package root. But then that also opens up different questions. So like, I think we shouldn't try to solve this at all if we're going to solve it piecemeal. And that means like, we should solve it not just for deep imports, and we shouldn't, or not just for the root import, and we shouldn't solve it either in a way that forces a package JSON file to be littered in every directory, to point to different indexes or things like that. And yeah, so I think that I appreciate the approach of like, how can we provide something in the meantime, which we'd need if the other things failed, for sure. But I'm not sure that this really does it. This is a very like kind of shallow approach. And to be fair, main itself is not a very complete solution. It's just the one we've had forever. I would have vastly preferred something like the browser field, where like you can specify, you can overload input specifiers and point them to specific files. Perhaps ways you could map directories to directories, things like that. But like, since we don't have that for common JS, I think it's tricky to propose it for ESM. So I don't know. I think we're just kind of in a tough place where main is incomplete. What's the word I'm looking for? A similar looking solution for ESM would be similarly incomplete, and so I'm just not sure if that solves it yet.
Jan?
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted, am I actually audible?
Yes.
Can't tell. Okay, cool. So one thing that I wanted to react to on what John just said is, I think, at least in the past, we had very strong disagreement on the fact that extension searching would solve this problem. And I think John also touched on this whole thing where it's like package roots, different package roots. At least usually in packages, having both the MJS and the JS in the same directory, just different extensions, would be a highly unusual package layout, and a very, in many cases, hard to maintain layout, because it will always be some kind of weird foreign body. So I'm not convinced that extension searching is a solution. At least I would hope it's not a solution, because it will always be a little bit awkward. At least in packages maintained by myself, it would lead to just 2 junk files in some random directory, and the rest of the implementation is in 2 other directories. So it's just more junk files that are already created by top level files for, in quotation marks, deep imports. So I'd rather not go even deeper into that direction.
Okay. Salah?
Yeah, so I think the question of extension searching being a solution requires convention for extensions, which was something people entertained before there was two JavaScript things trying to claim the JS extension. Like let's eliminate talk about which will claim the JS extension, but not having constancy there makes it less of a solution to rely on as in a way that would be predictable when back in the day when it was only common JS that was JS, and we worried about extension resolution for other things. So dual packages not being solved by convention will require some fields, and we seem to be very hesitant for good reasons to actually claim one of those fields and go with it. We're struggling to, like, I'm just trying to, observe where we keep looping back is that every time we hesitate and then we eventually put a field in package JSON and then we double back, and if the problem can be solved without a package JSON field, then we would have solved it. So maybe the problem is that we have to agree that we need to not hesitate and explore at least one or two ways to use package JSON, and try to actually nurture a solution up until it proves really disastrous before we give up on it. Type is just the one example of trying so hard to stick to a plan to introduce a field as simple as it's a string. It doesn't really do much, and the amount of friction and the amount of hesitation, we have to agree if the problem can be solved without a package JSON field, then we have to actually clearly state that, or we have to commit to the fact that we need a field, try 2 or 3 different incubator solutions, and then pick one that has the least friction and tell other people that believe us it's better than the other two. We have to agree that a solution is in a particular approach, and then stick to that approach and not hesitate. I think that's what I observe us being stuck at for a while now. I'm sorry, I'm being harsh, but I'm actually just trying to observe, this vicious circle we're in.
Sure. Jan, do you still have your hand up from before? Or do you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, let me fix that.
Okay. And JDD, did you have something? Welcome. Yeah, just to respond to Salah, yeah, I feel like we're a little bit in the realm of like the perfect is the enemy of the good, that like people want ideal solutions that cover all these cases of like pretty looking specifiers that also go for deep imports, and and it's like, it's just how do we get from here to there? You know what I mean? Like if you want to propose some massive PR that does a half dozen things, that it adds extension searching and does X, Y, and Z, like, you can do so. But if any one of those 6 things that are bundled together in your PR don't have consensus, then the whole thing falls. So I was trying to get us like, is there an iterative approach we could take where we could just take any little thing that has consensus and build on that? And yeah, it's not going to be what you prefer if you get extension searching or if you get require VSM, etc. But like, like here's a thought. Could we take the same approach that we did for the first big upstream PR, where we create a branch on the ECMAScript modules repo, And that's where we just kind of assemble either the dual package solution or all of phase 3, however big we need to make it. And, you know, that's where we could just like put pieces in and they're not going to core. And we can build it iteratively. Like, for example, we add this main module field, and then maybe we add require VSM and so on and so forth. We add extension searching and then we get rid of the main module field, etc. But we could go through all those steps of development in this kind of private space, safe from Node core, safe from releases on Node 12. And then we'll get to the end of that and we'll see, like at some point we will have to make a decision. Okay, we're accepting that, you know, extension searching is or isn't going to happen, and therefore this is what it is. And then we propose it to upstream. How would people feel about that?
Could I add one point to that?
Sure.
Learning from last iteration cycles that we had, I think that we have to all agree that this is, you know, the chore is on us all, and just having the critique perspective on a solution is good. It's healthy, but being involved in a solution, even if you don't necessarily back the idea as being the ultimate solution in your best, you know,
Your ideal world.
Ideal world, is not necessarily the only reason why you criticize something. If you get involved in something that you don't necessarily, you know, buy into, you could buy into by making it better along the way, in the sense that it would actually align better with what you would like in an ideal world, but also, you know, that gives a lot more credibility to when you criticize something, that this criticization is not abstract. And I'm very abstract, I know, but when it's a concrete criticization, and you know that there is no other way but to actually fix that problem, then we actually build upon and not just tear down ideas, as we've had in previous cycles.
So we have 8 people. I guess I could propose something that if we get consensus among the 8 of us, then we just need to get one more, like say Miles or someone else after this meeting, and then we have something that we have consensus. So let me just throw this out there. The exports proposal, the proposal that creates a new field to package a JSON. Maybe we call it exports, maybe we call it main module, whatever. We can discuss that in a second. Can we merge that into some new branch, like the modules LKGR or future upstream branch, whatever, some branch in the ECMAScript modules repo that's intended to be an eventual upstream PR? Can we merge in a PR that creates a new field for the ESM entry point? And then the understanding is that A, that could go away if and when we get extension searching, and B, this branch that we're merging into won't be upstreamed until down the line when we're done with everything related to dual packages, and that it's the upstreaming it itself will be subject to its own need for consensus. And then, so this would create the field, and then the require VSM could follow, you know, other things could follow to gradually improve it. Jordan, did you want to comment on that before I ask for consensus, or?
So as someone said earlier, anyone can write the code, can put PR into branches, merge into branches. I think the bigger question is it merged into a branch that is
merged into the what?
Like if it's merged into a branch that is considered important, like this signals something. If you just want to make a branch on the fork or something to play with it and make PRs into it, go for it. You don't even need consensus, I think, to do that.
Well, I mean, we already have that. I'm talking about this would be similar to what we were doing before we did the first upstream PR, where I think it was, I forget which branch it was, modules LKGR.
Yeah.
This would be intended to be merged into that, which then becomes an upstream PR eventually.
That merging in there, despite what you just said, where, oh, we can remove it if blah, blah, blah. In the past, things that have been merged in that sense have not been so easy to remove. People have not wanted to. And so I think that that merging those things is actually sending a signal that it's going to land. So, and to Rob's comment in the chat, yes, if we have extension searching, if we have other means, all the other things that we would prefer, then this exports thing should be, like, I would veto it, as would other people, as they've indicated. So I don't see why it gives us any benefit to signal that this is a thing we should ship if it's something that we decidedly aren't going to ship in some scenarios.
The scenario would be if extension searching never happens, this ships still. That's the point.
But that,
so is anyone opposed to merging this in? Whereas if everything else gets blocked after this, this gets up, sent in as an upstream PR.
Where if there's somebody who isn't super stoked on extension searching, but is super stoked on the field approach, wants to make sure it ships, they will make sure extension searching never ships, and this thing will have already been set up to go for it. And I guess I think that there's no downside to leaving like a bunch of PR proposals unmerged and open for months while we figure this out, and just kind of getting them all ready to land, but not landing any of them. There's no actual benefit to doing that.
There is a downside in that it's really hard to maintain these PRs as like upstream node constantly is getting rebased. So it's like it needs to get merged in soon, or else it just like becomes like you have to do all the work over again. And we have to make progress as a team. Like we weren't able to get to phase 2. Like we would never have gotten there if we just had like 18 PRs sitting open for months. We have to eventually make decisions and merge things in.
Well, right. But then I think the things we should be making decisions on are those contentious things. And I think it's better that we do in fact block everything on some of the really important decisions that define future paths forward. Because if we don't do that, then we spent how long in this modules group not deciding on the big things?
Okay, let me just be blunt. We had several meetings on extension searching.
Yeah.
We had a out of band meeting specifically on it.
Yeah.
And the only consensus we were able to reach was this flag where you have to enable it by opt-in. I'm assuming that nothing has changed since then.
Well, the consensus
there was more than half the group that were opposed to extension searching enabled by default, and I'm assuming that that hasn't changed. That's not likely to change, especially if all we need is one to object.
No,
I'm assuming that's the status quo and will remain the status quo probably till the end of this group.
So Jeffrey, the consensus we had was we're putting it in with the flag to gather feedback so that people can choose one or the other and tell us what they want. We've already gathered a bit of feedback that says that people really want it. And I have not yet seen any evidence that having it causes anyone any harm. So I think it's very likely that it will land with
I disagree completely. I think the fact is we don't have consensus on it. I'm alone, fine. I'm the one who disagrees. There's probably others, as there were more than half the group like a month ago. So
yeah,
the question is, if it remains
Jordan,
that
I'd be very, very careful when stating that you know what the consensus is, because that's a very leading way of stating decisions and turning them.
Let me clarify, because I don't want to misstate. This consensus I recall from previously was that we were shipping without it by default, and we would add the functionality with a flag. The purpose of adding that was of still allowing arms.
I'm specifically referring to the fact that you said most people are for this.
I didn't say. I said
it was your wording around that. I just don't think that one should allude to knowing what the votes are without it being explicit votes, because that leads consensus.
So I did not say that.
Okay.
And I did not mean to say that, and I don't know what the final consensus will be.
Sure, no problem at all.
What I stated was what the consensus was, and I think. And that hasn't been corrected by anyone yet. And my personal belief is that I think it is likely that a consensus will be achieved. don't know that for certain.
So Jordan, are you planning to block this PR that I've been talking about of a separate field because you think that someday we're going to have extension searching and you're going to block anything that doesn't involve extension searching?
I don't want to say that I'm just going to block because that has felt necessary in the past, but that did not work out very well in the past. But I think that we should not have anything whatsoever in package.json if there's a better way to do it. that is, especially if it's local to the file in question. And I think that extension searching is a much better way to do some of these things.
Right. But
May I suggest something at this point?
yes.
For extension searching, we put the bar at we are fine collecting feedback by adding a flag for opt-in. Can we do the same for the package JSON field to collect feedback? Have an opt-in flag. By default, we have a not. And then we can collect feedback on both sides. And I think another thing that we are missing right now is for collecting feedback, we don't have a good way to quantify the feedback. For example, I understand why Jordan is saying, hey, I'm hearing from all sides that they really want this feature. But at the same time, I'm not sure we have a good way to quantify that when the default behavior that will not make people reach out to us, we won't hear from people who like the default behavior. We will hear from the people who don't like the default behavior. So I'm not sure we have a good way of actually collecting that feedback in a way that is statistically meaningful. At least that's my impression right now.
That's fair, Jan, but the extension searching has been on by default in the implementation prior to Node 12, the flagged implementation. So we've had lots of time to gather feedback from the folks that don't like it. And there's not zero, but
I
right.
think it's
I think my point here is we said that we wanted to gather this feedback, but we haven't specified what that means, like how we actually want to get the feedback, whether we would just want to, and it's fine if we say GitHub issues and personal discussions that we have as members of the group is our mechanism, but I think we should be somewhat explicit about what we are looking for when it comes to the feedback.
Yeah.
Jan, would you be willing to create an issue to discuss this further so we can bring the discussion offline for next meeting around this feedback process?
So getting back to the question, so I'm assuming that there are people who would object to merging in a PR that creates this field with the understanding that this would end up shipping if extension searching never does.
So based on what Jan said, I think if we're going to ship it behind where it's not on by default, but it's behind an additional flag.
We're not shipping it at all. I'm just talking about merging it into a branch, the modules LKGR branch in Eclipse modules.
I think that they're the same. If it's merged, it's going to eventually ship. So I think that that we should merge it behind an additional flag. If the extension searching flag is enabled and this other flag is enabled, I think it should throw, and I wouldn't have any objection to that. And that's a great way we can gather that feedback.
So Jordan, can you, sorry, because I'm just trying to, separate the issues. So I think it's fair to say that no blocking, don't block a parallel development of things that are.
It's never fair to tell anyone they can't block. Everyone can always block at any time for any reason.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let me try to finish the thought.
Sure.
If until it gets flagged feedback that puts it in disfavor, blocking is counterproductive to a potential solution not visible until proven not a solution. So as extension searching is out there with a flag, collecting feedback, which we need a mechanism to actually balance, other features should not be blocked. And I'm not saying you don't have the right to block, but I mean, theoretically should not be blocked if they are to benefit from or to have as much benefit from user feedback, which we will still need to figure out a way to quantify fairly. Blocking once user feedback comes and it proves favorable is counterintuitive. But blocking something from actually showing that it's favorable or not by the ecosystem seems unfair. If the premises you laid out that any code merged eventually lands, then it's unfair to block anything from actually becoming flagged, or it's so it's unfair for you to make both statements.
I hear that that's what you believe and that's what you feel. I don't agree. However, in this case, I think that it's fine to ship it behind a flag, like as I described.
Okay, so yeah, no need to make too many branches. Just make sure it lands flat. And with the idea that we're collecting user feedback, it's not even experimental. It's like
I think it is a much more successful approach that we can take going forward when we're trying to talk about potential new features that might be contentious, to ship them behind additional flags for the purposes of gathering feedback.
Thank you for clarifying. I really appreciate this. This makes a lot of difference.
So we're over time, and there were people who had their hands up. Wes.
I'm sorry, I put my hand up like 20 minutes ago, about 3 topics ago.
Okay. Jan.
Sorry for that. Going down.
Okay. All right. So experimental WASM modules. Guys asking if anyone objects to that, or if not, can you go and? I mean, do we have 8 people here who are okay with that PR?
We need 9 for quorum.
Right, but if we get one person who just approves the PR beyond the 8 of us here. So does anyone object to that PR?
We've already got Gus, so between that we do have 8.
All right, so
Sorry,
we do
Andy.
have one thing that has consensus. So I guess with regards to the new field, do we have consensus of potential of adding the new field behind a flag, at least among the people here?
And let's debate the implementation on GitHub. But yeah, that seems like a good approach forward.
Okay, no one objects to that at least. Okay, so at least we've got 2 things going forward. Anything else before we wrap up today?
Just a general thing. The WASM module thing pointed out that WASM modules don't support live bindings. Like, not just that they can't export them, they can't import them. That seems super weird to me, and I'm not involved in WASM at all. So like, maybe, I don't know, Guy or someone else who is involved could either help me help me understand it privately, or could, try and correct that, because that seems like a critical feature of ES modules that WASM doesn't have.
As far as I'm aware, there's some kind of, I'm not a WASM expert by any means in terms of how it's implemented in V8, but as far as I'm aware, there is some kind of process where WASM values are turned into JS values on the imports, and it's a sort of an unwrapping or unboxing, or I don't know what they call it. And basically, when they're doing that, WASM is a static format, so everything is referenced statically, and it's very, in terms of getting that performance. So updating a binding, or potentially even updating its type, which you can do with live bindings, would naturally be compatible with that. And similarly for exports, when you have a WASM value statically in WASM world, it's not necessarily going to be accessible to JS without also going through some kind of translation process, if it's a uint32 or a 64 or whatever. So it's a kind of a functional in and out that can't be expressed.
It doesn't seem that every export from WASM is a const, like it because that.
Can I ask you guys to take this offline, if you don't mind?
You guy, I'll talk to you.
So I'll I or Guy or somebody will refactor the PR with the field to add a flag. And then I think the next step then, Wes, would be for you to follow up with a PR for require VSM that builds on that PR with the field. Is that fair?
I mean, I suppose I need to follow up with a PR for the require VSM in one way or another, but
I guess it doesn't need to involve package.json, I guess.
No,
just a PR that enables require VSM, period. And
Like,
we can worry about packages later.
like I as I've been saying, I have a PR that, like, I have a branch that does that. The real question is, how far do I go in merging the 2 resolvers after that? And that's where I couldn't get anyone to actually talk about the last 3 times I brought it up, because people have different opinions about that.
Well, can you at least maybe make the PR against modules LKGR on the ECMAScript modules repo that just is like proof of concept, show us require VSM, and save the refactoring for like a follow-on effort?
Yeah, I mean, I linked it in the proposal issue, but sure, I guess.
Well, it's clearly not getting enough attention. So if you want to maybe open it as a PR and tag it with modules agenda, then we can start to debate it and people can try it out and see if it's viable and all that kind of stuff. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have ways forward. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
See you. Hey.
What's up?
Thanks.